Today I'm talking about George Orwell's 1984. So I'm a little bit surprised that I've not read this book before. In high school, required reading was Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and it was read in lieu of 1984. Until now I haven't read the book, even though I have read some other stuff by George Orwell. I read Animal Farm, as well as Keep the Aspidistra Flying, which both of those I did enjoy a lot. And so first, in case you don't know, the plot of 1984. It's broken into three different parts. The first part basically just sets up the setting and describes the society, which it's a surveillance state. Not only are there cameras watching you at all times, people will tell on you for suspicious activity, and the government tries to limit the interaction between people because it could lead to people thinking for themselves. The second part of the book is devoted to the main character, Winston's relationship with Julia, which is a woman he meets in the first part of the book, and they both take on these revolutionary ideas and aims that they'd like to carry out. The third part of the book, Winston is found out and is sent to a torture or a rehab program. And at the climax of the book, he's sent to the mysterious room 101, where you're confronted with your largest fear in your life. So it's a form of psychological torture. So I'm going to keep my review kind of short because I feel that a lot of people have read this book and probably have their own ideas about it. But I thought overall the book adheres so well to what Orwell considered good writing. He said that using small words was always better than using long words, and that one should never write in the passive voice. And I think that those rules were carried out consistently throughout 1984, and it created a very accessible and quick read. Also, I don't know what it is, but whenever there's a sense of a persecution narrative or suffering of a strong protagonist, I feel like I just have to keep reading. It's somewhat masochistic on my part, but maybe I'm just embracing my Protestant roots or something. But it's kind of strange because I don't usually like violence depicted in movies. Also, just props to Orwell because I felt that the structure of the society really matched the structuralism of the form of the book, the subject matter, the difference in subject matter between the three parts. Some of the weaknesses that I found in the book: I really did not enjoy the lengthy inclusion of Goldstein's book at the central part of the novel. So this is something that the characters are reading, a revolutionary piece of literature that is kind of an instruction guide about how to overthrow the government. For some reason, Orwell puts in page after page of this text that's lifted from Goldstein's book. Winston even says that the book doesn't tell him anything he doesn't already know, and I felt that the same kind of applied to me. It was a bit too much spoon-feeding on Orwell's behalf, perhaps to people in 1949 when the book was written who had no idea of how to conceive of the society that he was describing. Also, the political nature of the work became just a little bit too overt for me. One, because of the inclusion of Goldstein's book, like I said, but also because of the postlude of the book, which is entitled Principles of Newspeak, in which he basically states that by 2050, by the year 2050, everything is basically screwed, and there's these principles of the new way of thinking that will become cemented in people's minds. But based on what I already knew about the book, I have to say that it seemed like the issues that Orwell raises in his dystopia are issues that were already happening in the early to mid 20th century United Kingdom. Newspeak is something utilized by any leader, I think, from JFK to Lenin to Obama. And I'm really not comparing those three people, only the idea that they use and change language to their advantage. For example, enhanced interrogation instead of torture, or Iraqi liberation rather than war. And I'm getting some of these ideas from Erich Fromm's Afterword, which was in my edition of the book, this Signet Classics edition. Erich Fromm lists some more examples of doublethink, which is another Orwellian term. Doublethink is the simultaneous acknowledgement and disregard for something contradictory. For example, 2 plus 2 can equal 5. So Erich Fromm's examples are a little bit dated because I think he was writing that Afterword in 1961, but he's basically listing examples in history of this happening. Newspeak or doublethink, sometimes for good and sometimes for evil. Leaders do use it for their advantage. I just wonder if there's anything different about the nature of that now versus earlier in the 20th century. Another thing is that although I'm sure there are counterexamples to what I'm about to say, I do question whether the side effects of more surveillance in modern society, maybe through the rise of technology, are as bad as what Orwell thought they would be. So I suppose the better question would be, are we somehow closer to that Orwellian recipe? So that if technology is already in the place that it is, if other things were altered a bit, maybe, for example, a breakdown of separations of power or breakdown of checks and balances here in the US, could we more easily get closer to the society of 1984? Essentially, I'm wondering if we are as close to an Orwellian society as many people make us out to be, or if maybe the United States more so resembles Aldous Huxley's society in Brave New World. So kind of comparing the modern day United States with Orwell's 1984 to me is a bit less interesting than the question of why certain regions or cultures of the world head towards differing dystopian futures, I'll call them. I'm planning on revisiting Huxley's Brave New World, so I look forward to reading that again and telling you if some of these same ideas as I'm having in 1984 could apply to that novel. If you haven't read this, there is a reason that it's taught in schools all over the world. I think it's worth reading.